Hi everyone. Today we have the second instalment of Wee Dougie, the Highland Elf. In today's story, Benjamin Badger comes to the glen and asks Wee Dougie to help him find a rare plant remedy. This requires a favour from Nessie, the Loch Ness Monster. But how can they find her? And will they be in time? A surprise for today's reading is that we have the author, David George Douglas, reading the story for you. So get comfortable, relax, and enjoy the next Wee Dougie adventure.
Wee Dougie and Benjamin Badger by David George Douglas. For Bridie, Holly, Skye and Farah. This is number 2 in a series of 12. The snow had arrived late, well into January, but it came meaning to stay. Driven by a harsh wind, it piled drifts several feet high. The pines took on that magical otherworld look, and the Caledonian forest became a winter playground for the elves, fairies, goblins, and other creatures living within its wide expanse. Wee Dougie, a young in elf years, Scottish Highland elf, had not long returned from the North Pole, where he'd helped Santa get ready for Christmas morning. He'd gone with Shugo, his pet haggis, and Morag, his faithful Shetland pony, and they'd returned full of stories to tell the villagers of Drumbodnod, where Dougie's clan had lived for hundreds of years. The village was one of several spread throughout the glen of Kilkettle, and was well sheltered from the elements by steep slopes on 3 sides. The glen opened wide to the south, allowing a low but bright sun to provide enough light to glisten the snow hanging on the wide variety of shrubs, bushes and trees. Wee Dougie was meeting up with his pals to have an afternoon of skiing on the hillsides above Tillylair. His skis were made from the staves of an old whisky barrel, which Dougie had shaped and shaved smooth. He then applied a polish from a mixture of whin and gorse flowers, which set hard overnight, and allowed his skis to quickly skim over the firm snow. Bampot, Crabbit, Egypt and Gallus were waiting for him at Hall of Tillylair, and they made their way to the bottom slopes, where a herd of red deer were scraping the snow to reach the grass below. The elves had an arrangement with the deer, which involved them towing the elves to the upper slopes in return for feed being left for the deer at the hall. The pals enjoyed an action-packed afternoon, but also got up to some mischief when they noticed a group of clan elders heading to the hall for their normal weekly meeting. They could see that the elders would have to pass close to the bottom slopes at one point, so they began to form a large snowball, rolling it backward and forward, getting larger on each pass. At the right moment, they set it rolling from the higher level, and it quickly gathered speed and more snow as it headed for the unsuspecting group below. The elders only became aware of the danger at the last moment, and had to scatter in all directions to avoid the missile as it hurtled past. The friends collapsed onto the snow, laughing loudly, and looked down to see the elders wiping snow off themselves and shaking their fists at the ambushers. "We'll get you back," one shouted, and the friends huddled down in the snow so that they wouldn't be recognised. Wee Dougie and Shugle headed for home, looking forward to a good meal and a pleasant evening in front of the fire, usually burning a mixture of hardwood and big pine cones. As they grew close to their home, they became aware of another creature pacing to and fro and looking quite bemused. "Hallo," said Wee Dougie. "You look a bit lost." The creature turned out to be a badger, and he introduced himself. Good evening. I'm Benjamin Badger, and I'm looking for my old set. I was sure it was here somewhere." "Well, I'm Wee Dougie," and he turned to the haggis, who immediately struck up. "And I'm Shugle MacDougall of Auchenboogle," which he always did when first in strange company. "This place certainly looks familiar, but it's been many years since I moved away," said Benjamin. "I think you may be correct," said Dougie. "I converted my home from a disused badger set." "Ah, well, I'm glad it's been put to good use," smiled the badger. Dougie had added a new door opening at the foot of a tree, and as he opened it, he turned and asked Benjamin to come away in and see how things have changed over the past 50 years. The badger complimented Wee Dougie on how well he'd fitted out his former set, and was invited to sit himself down while the new occupant offered Benjamin a cup of Corby slap. This was a healthily concocted mixture of honey-sweetened mead and secret herbs, taken by elves for many years to stave off colds, flu, and other aches and pains. Morag wandered through from her stable to welcome Wee Dougie and Shugle home, and was surprised to see a total stranger sitting at the hearth. "This is Morag," said Dougie. "Not the Morag?" Benjamin asked. "The Shetland pony that stood in for Rudolph last Christmas? Your fame goes before you, lass. All the animal kingdom seems to have heard of your exploits to help Santa." Morag blushed to the roots of her mane. "I thoroughly enjoyed myself," she said, "and I met a lovely polar bear called Chickadar." "Oh, yes," exclaimed the badger. "Rumour has it he took a real shine to you." Wee Dougie and Shugle smiled and raised their eyebrows, as they knew Morag thought the world of the great bear. "So what's brought you back to your old haunts?" asked Dougie. "I wondered when we'd get round to that," answered Benjamin. "I have a great favour to ask of you." The three housemates exchanged puzzled looks, and waited for the badger to explain himself. He went on. "One of my best friends is a mole, and recently he ate some rare poisonous berries, which made him very poorly. Moles have pretty bad eyesight, and the poor chap mistook them for an edible variety. It's beginning to look quite serious, and we're concerned that he may not recover. I heard from one of our wise old ones that she'd been told of a special remedy, but that it was almost impossible to obtain. The remedy requires a special plant that only grows at the bottom of one of the lochs in the great glen, and I was hoping you'd journey with me and help find some for us. Well, it's not the best time of year to be trekking over the Scottish Highlands, said Dougie, but in the circumstances we should do our very best to help your friend the mole. The next morning, Wee Dougie met up with the leader of the red deer, and it was agreed that the herd would migrate early to the great glen. This should provide a trail for the small party to follow, and would take the low route along the river valleys. Eventually, they should reach the deepest of the long, narrow lochs in the steep-sided cleft that splits the Scottish landscape from west to east. Morag was saddled up, and Wee Dougie rode with Shugle strapped to his back. With Benjamin in their wake, they made good time following the herd, but had to travel all day and all of the next night before arriving at the dark waters close to a ruined castle, long abandoned by its previous human occupants. After expressing thanks to the deer herd, they watched on as Benjamin scoured the banks of the loch, seeking out the opening he'd last used many years before. After some time he called out, and, reluctantly telling Morag to stay with the deer in case things went wrong and a search party was required, the badger, elf, and haggis entered the narrow cave opening and began to descend through the rock. The way down proved difficult and sometimes dangerous, but they persevered and eventually found themselves in a wide chamber with a dark pool at its centre. The air was dank and had a salty smell, which was strange because this was many miles from the sea. Benjamin crossed over to a ledge set high in the wall, on which rested a large animal horn. He reached up and lifted the object gently down and set it onto the floor of the chamber before moving it to the edge of the pool. Wee Dougie and Shugle watched on as he placed the wider end of the horn beneath the surface and, taking the narrow end toward his snout, he took a deep breath and blew into it strongly. A strange sound could be heard, but when they looked at the water, instead of the bubbles rising to the surface, they sank down and disappeared. Benjamin repeated the process several times over the next hour or so, before sitting down with the two friends and announcing, "Well, we'll just have to wait to see if she hears it." What do you mean?" asked Wee Dougie. "Who's she?" Benjamin replied, "Why, Nessie, of course. She's the only one who can get to the plants I need. I hope she recognises the call." Shugle took a lopsided step backwards. Haggis, of course, have 2 long legs on one side and 2 short legs on the other side to make it easier to run round Scottish hillsides. "I thought she was just a legend," he muttered through gritted teeth. "She can't be real." Benjamin laughed. "You'd better believe it. Mind you, it's been over 50 years since I last had a chat with her. She could be anywhere out there." They sat in silence for what seemed like ages, staring at the pool, and had nearly given up hope when they heard an odd blurping sound, and the surface water began to move in whirls. Slowly, a dark, slate-grey, serpentine head broke through and hissed. "Hello, old friend. I thought I recognised your call. How long has it been?" Wee Dougie was rooted to the spot, and Shugle had disappeared behind a rock as soon as the blurping began. He was taking it all in with just one eye, the only part of him visible from his shelter. "My, it's good to see you again, Nessie. Yes, it's been too long. How have you been?" asked the badger. "Well," Nessie said, "every 10 or 20 years I take a look up top to see what's changed. I don't notice much, but these humans look at me as though I'm some kind of monster. So most of the time I squeeze through my secret passage down here and get back out to sea. Anyway, since you called, there must be something important that I can help with." No sooner had Benjamin recounted his story about his friend the mole than Nessie hissed, "Wait here," before she slipped silently below the water. "She seems quite nice," said Wee Dougie, "but her breath smells a bit fishy." "I'm staying where I am," quivered a very nervous-looking haggis. "I'm with the humans on this." After only a short time, Nessie reappeared with a large mouthful of plant material. "I think this should be plenty," she said. Benjamin leaned over the pool and put his snout to Nessie's nose. "I can't thank you enough, my good friend. I'm sorry. I wish I could stay and chat to you some more. But I must get back quickly. I promise I'll return in the summer when the cold doesn't get to my old bones so much, and we'll get ourselves up to date. Thank you so much." "Goodbye," hissed Nessie before disappearing. The trio retraced their steps to find Morag waiting anxiously on the loch side. "Thank goodness, I was beginning to get worried," she said. Wee Dougie and Shugle mounted up and accompanied Benjamin to the head of the loch, where they said their goodbyes. "Please let us know how things go with your friend," asked Wee Dougie. "You could use the normal buzzard mail. That gets up here in 2 or 3 days." "Will do," answered the badger, "and now I'd better get on my way." A few days later, Dougie and Shugle found themselves at Hall of Tilly-Lair, together with Bampot, Crabbit, Egypt, and Gallus. The elders had summoned them all to answer to the great snowball incident, which now seemed a long time ago. Egypt, as usual, was staring skyward with a vacant expression on his face, when suddenly he pointed up in the air at a large bird circling downwards. "Look, it's the messenger buzzard," he cried. With its wide wingspan, the dark brown bird eased down onto the flat area to the front of the hall. "I have a message for someone called Wee Dougie," he squawked. "That's me," said the elf, walking toward the bird of prey. "And I'm his friend, Shugle MacDougall of Auchenboogle." The buzzard eyed the haggis, cocked his head to one side, and commented, "You look quite tasty, and I haven't had my breakfast yet." The haggis moved with surprising agility behind Doogie's 4 pals, and then kept very quiet. The buzzard continued, I bring good news. The mole has made a full recovery, and Benjamin asked me to express his deepest thanks and to say he hopes to get back up this way in the summer." His message delivered, the bird rose majestically, still peering at where Shugle was taking shelter, before heading off to his next destination. "Now, Dougie, we really need to get a better disguise for Shugle," said Crabbit. "The elders only found out it was us because they recognised him." The haggis was immediately on the defensive, telling anyone in earshot his usual line, "I'll have you know that haggis are an endangered species." Crabbit grabbed the haggis by the throat, or where he thought his throat should be, and muttered menacingly, "You'll be a lot more endangered, pal, if the elders make our life a misery." Shugle gulped and looked pleadingly at Wee Dougie, who smiled and said, "It's okay, Shugle, he's only kidding." "Aye, I'm only kidding, pal," said Crabbit, slipping his arm round the tubby little haggis, who gulped nervously. As things turned out, the elders went easy on the friends and suggested they make an extra bowl of Corby slap for the next gathering of the Glen inhabitants. When they got out, Wee Dougie laughed and said, "That was a close thing. Let's get Morag to give us a ride up the hill. There should be enough time to make another roller snowball to catch the elders on their way home." "Aye," sniggered Gallus, "we could use Shugle as the starter ball." The haggis didn't stop running until he was well inside Wee Dougie's home. The end.